Hey, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant and intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of water or tissues. As you can tell, I have a cold today, and let's get started. So if you're attending live, just a reminder that you're in listen-only mode. So you can go ahead and start typing questions into the Q&A box. There's a chat box also if you want to share any comments related to anything that we're discussing. And if you're watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that everything that we're talking about today is true to the best of my knowledge on January 10th, 2024, but things change really quickly at NIH, so you should always check with your program officer and or the website or instructions to make sure that everything is still accurate. What you should be viewing in the library right now, well, given that we are weeks away from upload time for the cycle one grant applications, I would imagine that you're probably kind of doing a systems check on everything. So I would think that a checklist to avoid top mistakes would probably be a good course for you to view if you have access to that one. And if not, maybe just watching Master the R Series Chapter 4 approach and kind of going over some of the nitty gritty of the approach section. Any NIH updates? Not anything that I can think of offhand. It's been pretty quiet, and there's no movement on the continuing resolution front. So you may see continuation of delays in the notice of award pending the federal funding decision for Health and Human Services, of which NIH is a part. Other updates from me, we are about to announce the dates for our upcoming boot camp. If anybody is interested in attending that, that is part of your membership. So I believe everybody on this call should have free access to any of the live stream boot camps. So a couple of changes for 2024, we're actually going to offer them 3 times a year instead of 2 times a year. And they're going to be offered to help launch you in the writing for the upcoming deadline. So we'll be offering them this year in early March, simply because I'm traveling a good part of February, to launch you into the writing for the June and July deadlines, and then again in July to launch you into writing for the October, November deadlines, and then again in like late October, November to launch you into the writing for the February, March 2025 deadlines. So in addition to offering a third one every year so that we have a live stream boot camp for every grant cycle, we're also, based on feedback that we've gotten from you guys, we're going to go back to offering it 1 chapter per week. This is how I used to offer it, and then people requested that it be done as a single half-day boot camp, which we've been doing for the last couple of years. Now people have gone back to requesting having 1 chapter per week because they feel like it's just a data dump of information. So it is very likely to be the first 4 Fridays in March. So the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd. And I think it's going to be, I believe it is going to be 2 p.m. Eastern time each of those Fridays, and probably will go for about an hour and a half, 2 hours each time. So each of those 4 consecutive Fridays, I'm going to be presenting 1 chapter of Master the R series, and then you'll be given, homework. You can work from the checklist in the learning management system. So in that way, hopefully it will maybe feel less like a data dump and more like we're writing together, and feel like more of a paced virtual live writing course. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see what you guys tell us in the surveys about how you like that. So in terms of a guest, today we were supposed to have my buddy David Widmer return to us to talk about things that you should look out for that could trip you up as you're getting ready to finalize your submission. Alas, both David and I live in the Northeast where everybody has just been laid low by rounds of colds and flu and COVID. And he's way sicker than I am. So you're stuck with me today. David will return in upcoming months, and he'll probably present this topic again in May. But keep in mind, he actually did write the topic up, and it's available on our blog, which you can link to from our homepage. And if we have that handy, Riley, go ahead and link the blog post in the chat. If not, it's easy to find in our, for the viewers, it's easy to find on our homepage. Okay, so I have nothing prepared for you today, so feel free to grill me with questions. I see that we have a bunch already, so I'm going to start reading them. I'm a senior grant writer and editor, and one of the investigators I work with is considering submitting an administrative supplement in response to a bioethics-oriented NOSI, Notice of Special Interest, that NCI is participating in. It would be a supplement to an existing P50, which is a Center for Excellence grant, for those who don't know, at my institution. I've never done an administrative supplement before. Aside from carefully reading the NOSI and the companion NOFO RE admin supplements in general, do you have any special best practices or strategies for preparing administrative supplements? You know, I've been getting a lot of questions about administrative supplements lately. It's kind of interesting. And I think we did a blog post on them recently. I'd have to go back and look, but I think one of my team members wrote something up on administrative supplements. But the thing that I'll say about them is my sense anecdotally is that the funding lines tend to be pretty favorable on administrative supplements if the parent grant is going well. And they tend to be very idiosyncratic. So each one is kind of its own beast. So, you know, like when you're writing an RO1 submission to the parent RO1, there are lots of things I can tell you that are general best practices kind of across institutes and study sections. With administrative supplements, each one is really kind of its own unique beast. So unfortunately, beyond telling you to employ all your typical best grant writing practices in terms of like always keep reviewer behavior in mind. These are tired people who are skimming your grant application, potentially at 2 a.m. when they have a stack of applications to read. So make it really, spend a lot of time on formatting and make it really easy for them to pull out the key points. That's true for all grant applications, right? So, and I would have a conversation with the program officer to talk about anything that they might be looking for very specifically, because having worked in the administrative branches of NIH funding institutes. I was at I was at NINDS as a postdoc, but NHGRI as a staff writer. I will tell you that there are conversations that occur among program officers as they're formulating NOFOs and administrative supplements, and what actually gets written up might not fully reflect what that conversation was. So it's always a good idea to, in addition to reading the NOFO, to speak with the program officer and really get a sense of what they're looking for. So it looks like, just a quick aside, it looks like Riley has put that blog post in the chat that David wrote up for today's session. And again, he'll return another time when he's not sick to present that. Okay, next question. Question about the NIH biosketch, which I was working on 10 minutes ago before I got on this call. As I craft my biosketch for the K01 application, so the K01 is a type of career development award. It's a mentored award. I'm uncertain about listing ongoing grants under the personal statement. Ongoing grants that I would like to highlight include Specifically, I'm contributing to a mentors grant, but I'm not officially named in the grant document. Can I still include details about this grant in that section? I would say no. Typically, so for those who are a little confused about what we're talking about, the old biosketch used to have a section D where you would talk about current and recent support. That's now it's now removed. There is no more section D, and that's gotten tucked into the end of section A, where you can list current and recent support. So typically the types of support that you list there is where you're named in some way, either as a co-investigator or collaborator or site PI or something like that. If you want to highlight the help that you're providing on your mentors grant, which is a place where you're not being named, but which I would imagine you're going to be named on publications that result from it since you're working on it, I would actually write that information in the personal statement of the in section A, so above, the narrative section. But I wouldn't list it in the current and recent support if you aren't a named team member on that grant. That's my personal feeling on it. Okay, the next one, NIH reporter question. Do you know if there's a way to search awards made for a particular NOSI? I've tried to do this and that doesn't appear to be a data field included there. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that as a data field either, but NOSIs are fairly recent. So I wonder if it's actually worth, making that request to one of the general information emails that are provided all over the place at NIH. Because if you make the request for that data field, my guess is it will eventually be added. It doesn't help you right now, but this is how NIH knows what people want. The closest I've come is searching for awards by PO and then reaching titles, abstracts for relevance to the NOSI. Thank you. Yeah, Liz, I don't remember ever seeing that on the reporter website. But as I said, NOSIs are a fairly recent occurrence, just within the last couple of years. And the reporter website is always a little outdated, right? Because it takes time for data to be added. So maybe there's a plan to include it. I would reach out to the program officer and see if they have any metrics on that, or if they could give you the names of a couple of representative projects that you could then just search manually on the reporter website to see what's being funded under that NOSI. That might be the best way to go. Let me know how that turns out, though. I'd be very curious. Okay, next one. I'm looking at submission for submitting a grant to the state to fund a new research core lab. Some guidance, please. So it's a little hard for me to give you guidance because I'm an NIH grant writer and I don't typically work on state funding and I don't know which state. But I will say, my guess is what you're asking, based on the way this is worded, is that you're looking for some sort of state funding to establish the rudiments of a core that will eventually be a core in an NIH multi-project submission, because that's a really typical scenario. So if you have access to, for those of you who are listening, if you have access to my course, Master the PNU series, I talk quite a bit in the prep portion of that course about how to prepare for a competitive center grant application or multi-project U, like a U54. And typically the way those are structured is that you have like a bunch of projects, and you also may have one or more cores that service the projects. And then sometimes the projects collaborate amongst themselves as well. And in order to be competitive going into those applications, typically you have identified some kind of funding that's more local, that would be used to develop the core, and maybe some funding from your organization to build up the team that's going to be submitting this multi-project submission down the line. So I'm guessing that's what you're doing and why you're asking about it. So having never written a state funding application at all, I will say that I do know that lots of private foundations pattern their applications and their review processes on NIH. And so, all of your typical grant writing best practices would probably be used here, where you want to read every single solitary word of the funding opportunity announcement. If appropriate, I would reach out and have a conversation with the whoever the person is who oversees it. This notice of funding opportunity announcement, so it would be like the PO equivalent. I would be very familiar with the way it's reviewed, because you can't write something unless you know who your audience is and what their behavior might be in terms of like what's happening when they're reviewing this. Are they skimming it while people are talking, which is the way it happens at NIH, which means that you have to make it really skimmable. And I would probably include the fact that this is going to go on to be part of a bigger application, that this is going to be the establishment of a core that is then going to be part of a multi-project NIH application, where you'll ask for funding for like a center or whatever it's going to be. So I would kind of position it in time so that they know this isn't a one-off. It's actually a stepping stone toward federal funding, which I think would probably appeal to a state funder, is my guess. So that's the best I can do in terms of giving advice for that. So my apologies if that's not terribly helpful, but I never work on state applications. Um, but I do work with lots of people who have gotten state funding for cores for multi-project submissions. So if anybody else has other suggestions, for that person, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, so I am working on the one-page update for an RO1 I submitted in October. So I think by one-page update, I think what you mean is you're resubmitting this, and that you're talking about the one-page introduction to the revised application, which is colloquially referred to as the response to reviewers. Do you have suggestions for best practices that I should incorporate as I prepare this for submission? So I can't remember which organization you are at, but I think a lot of the people on this call have access to my full library of courses. So there is a course called Master Resubmissions, and I actually have a whole section on tips on how to write the one-page introduction, and even like a template for how to format it. But very briefly, just to kind of summarize some of the high-level feedback that I would give you on that. I think one of the big mistakes that people make is, you only have one page to argue persuasively and show that you're being responsive to the critiques. I wouldn't spend precious real estate on that page verbatim quoting the critique. I think that's a waste of space. And I particularly dislike that when it's bolded, because I feel like you're just drawing attention and using lots of real estate to restate the problem. And I think that page should be focused on solutions, not problems. So typically what I suggest people do is that they give like a brief little introductory paragraph. I'm sure you've seen this a million times in other people's applications, where you thank reviewers for the helpful comments, and you give brief quotes of 3 or 4 really positive things they said about the application, about its significance and how well written it was, et cetera, et cetera. And then say that the critiques were used to strengthen the application, detailed below. I wouldn't use more than about 4, maybe 5 lines for that. And then I would number the items, and so that they're easy for the reviewers to discuss. And I would briefly state the critique and underline it. Don't bold it, because it takes up too much room. And then use your precious space to answer the critique. If you have way too many critiques to list them out individually like that, it's okay to group them by section. like category. So problems with significance, and then write a paragraph where you address their various problems that they might have had with significance, or um, concerns about rigor, and then like write a paragraph. So you're devoting very little real estate to restating the problem. I also don't think it's terribly useful to say which reviewer said what. So um, I would really make sure that like 90% of the page is you writing about solutions. So that's kind of my big take home message there. But if you do have access to Master the R series, I'd encourage you. It's not that long. I think it's like an hour and 15 minutes. I'd encourage you at least to go look at the template for the introduction. Okay, let's see. Kate question. The conventional wisdom I've heard says the mentor should ideally be across the hall, and that any long distance mentor would be a no-go. That said, we have a recent K recipient at our institution that has mentors at another institution. What is your take on where a K mentor should be? Is long distance former postdoc advisor, for example, acceptable, or should they really be at the same institution? So in my experience, this is the very first time I've been an NIH grant writer since 2007. This is the very first instance I've heard of anyone landing a K where the mentor isn't on site. And it has been such an extreme problem that I even had an applicant who was working at a hospital in downtown Washington, D.C., proposing a mentor at, I think it was Hopkins Med, which for those of you who don't know is in Baltimore and is very easily accessible by public transportation or car. Like those two cities are really close. And it was a non-starter for the reviewers. They were like, no, it absolutely has to be somebody on site. So it's very interesting and curious to me that you have a K mentor at your institution where they were able to get approval for that. I will tell you that that is, as I said, the only instance of this I have ever heard of in my entire career across hundreds of K applicants over how many years have I been doing this? 17 years, 17 years. So, I personally wouldn't risk it. Unless you're in a situation where it's like, I have to submit a K right now, otherwise I'm using up too much of my ESI time and I have to start pursuing something in the R series so that I'm preserving a couple of RO1 submissions while I have ESI status. So like I have to put my K in now or never. Then you may as well go ahead and write it up and do a Hail Mary pass, right? And see if it flies. But in my experience, it's not going to fly. So that's my what I know about that. Okay, if I contact a PO to discuss reviews I got in my summary statements from NIH, example for an RO1 or R21, what should I be looking to find out? I have rarely gotten illuminating insight into contradictory reviews or any information that is not in the review. And yet, I've seen advice to contact POs after the summary statements come back. What should my goal be in these post-review, pre-submission conversations with the PO? What a great question and really well written. So first, I'm sorry that this has not been a positive experience for you. Probably in the best case scenario, if the application was discussed and the PO was in the room, often the PO can give you a lot more information about the discussion. Of course, they can't tell you who the reviewers are or who said what, but they could give you their take on the tenor of the discussion. And in particular, I have had situations where, again, the write-up is done by a person, and that person inadvertently may not faithfully and accurately capture the discussion in the room. And the program officer may have notes where they say, wow, in my opinion, the single most important thing that the reviewers got hung up on was X. But in the summary statements, they talk about Y, so in that instance, it would be incredibly helpful to talk with them about it. So I would say that the main things, and again, this is all in master resubmissions. If you have access to that, I would go and watch that, the kinds of things you want to ask the program officer. Um, if it was if the application was discussed and the PO was in the room and took notes, um, in their opinion, what were the key issues that the reviewers got hung up on? I would send them a draft of your introduction to the revised application and say, is in your opinion, if I make these changes that I've outlined in this introduction, will reviewers see that as being responsive to the critiques? I would also ask them about potentially other things, like if they said that, let's say, you want to ask, should I go into the same mechanism? Should it be an A1 or should I retool it and go in for an A0? Should I, be thinking about it, a different agency or foundation? Should I think about a different study section? It really depends on your specific set of circumstances. But for example, they said if you apply for an RO1 and they said you don't have enough data, you might have a conversation with the program officer about whether you should put in an R21. If they said you don't have, they don't believe you can do this RO1 because you lack some type of expertise, you could have a conversation about whether to put in a K. If they thought it was too outside the box, like too innovative, too high risk, you could have a conversation with the PO about whether to go for a private foundation or a different agency or one of the high risk, high reward mechanisms at NIH. If you kind of came away feeling like, wow, the reviewers just really didn't get it, like in a big way, like totally didn't get it, you can have a conversation about whether to go to a different study section, or to try to customize your study section by requesting some type of expertise be added via ad hoc member. If you are making drastic changes, or you really are unhappy with the summary statements, or you're unhappy with the summary statements, you could talk about whether to do a much bigger revamping of the application and put it in as a new A0 rather than an A1. So there are lots of decision points along the way. And again, all of these decision points are spelled out with NIH's rules for each of them in the Master the Resubmissions course. So I would make a list of the questions that would be relevant to your circumstances where you're looking for guidance. And even if your application wasn't discussed at a study section meeting, if it was triaged, I would still send the summary statements to the program officer, and a good program officer will read them and speak with you about what they think about the summary statements and what they know about that study section, and their thoughts about what your strategy should be for continuing to pursue NIH funding for that idea, and whether it should be the same NOFO, the same institute, the same study section, A1 versus A0, different study section or different foundation or agency. So all of those things are potentially things you would discuss with the program officer, and of course, whether your planned changes whether they think they would be viewed as responsive to the critiques. So all of which is to say, you still might have a dud of a program officer who's not going to give you great feedback or anything really beyond what you're reading in the summary statements. But it's worth a try, because a good one will really can often give you really great advice. And that's it. We're actually over time. So I thank you guys so much for asking questions, because I had no material prepared today because we were expecting David. So I really appreciate you guys asking questions. And we will return in 2 weeks. I think our guest is It looks like it is Burr Zimmerman, who I haven't had on in ages and ages. My good buddy Burr, who I met way back when we were both starting our grant writing careers. And I think he's talking about BARDA applications. I think that's what he decided on. So I love Burr. He's a great guy, a wonderful grant writer, really experienced and knowledgeable. So I think you guys will learn a lot from him, particularly because it's a completely different agency he'll talk about. So anyway, that's all that I have today. I wish you guys the very best in your NIH grant writing, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And hang in there. I know that that January is a tough month for everybody with grant writing, and I hope everybody stays healthy and that everybody is healthy for the next session. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.